My favorite superhero growing up was hands down Spider-Man. He was my favorite Saturday morning cartoon, my favorite pair of pajamas. Everything was Spider-Man when I was a little kid. So when I got into comic books, of course, the character that I gravitated to first was Spider-Man. And though I came in during the 90s, which was a very different time than the 1980s animated Spider-Man that I was used to, I still found him as fun and compelling as I always did. And that really started me on my journey of collecting and loving comic books. But a very close second to that was Ghost Rider. Now, Ghost Rider was a character that I saw on the newsstands and knew nothing about, but he was a character with a flaming skull for a head who rode a motorcycle, and when you were a young kid, that's pretty much all you need to determine that a character is pretty awesome. So he was everything that 90s comics needed to be. He was imposing looking, he was an anti-hero, he was dark, he was menacing, and he really was on the forefront of that 90s comic era and the fun that came along with it. And in the 90s, we didn't have Johnny Blaze Ghost Rider, and obviously Robbie Reyes hadn't come around yet. Our Ghost Rider was Danny Ketch. He was the second man to bear the title Ghost Rider in comics continuity, and he was the main star of the comic of the Ghost Rider. He was the Ghost Rider in the 1990s. And now that my current favorite title is just lamenting in one of the worst runs that I can remember in recent memory, I found myself at the comic book store just looking for anything to refresh my faith in humanity. And what did I happen to find? But Danny Ketch Ghost Rider #1. And how could I not pick this up? I mean, it's Ghost Rider and it's Dan Ketch as Ghost Rider. So I picked this up, and of course I had to pick up the Mark Texeira cover because that's the original artist of Ghost Rider. Well, the original inker turned artist of Ghost Rider, who is the artist that I associate most of the characters. So for this to fit seamlessly into my box with the rest of my Dan Ketch Ghost Rider volumes, had to go with the Dan Ketch cover. And I did notice, upon looking at the credits of the book, that Howard Mackey, the original creator of Danny Ketch and that writer, that Ghost Rider run, was the writer behind this series. So I was no end of excited to read this title, and it did not disappoint at all. The book starts off, as most Ghost Rider stories did in the 90s, in a creepy cemetery in Cypress Hill where Danny Ketch lives, and he's fighting some behemoth covered in hellfire. And the book just goes crazy from there. So Ghost Rider takes on this big hulking dude with hellfire. They have a big fight in a cemetery. He managed to overcome him, and just as he does, the demonic power that was powering this guy leaves his body, leaving only a guy who's lamenting on the ground, crying that he was promised the power that he needed to wreak revenge on the society that wronged him. Shortly thereafter, we find a new villain has come to town. This is a character named the Broker. And the Broker is a demon, apparently, or a servant of a demon, who's running around town making deals with people to give them power in exchange for their souls, and enough power to get back at those who have wronged them. And yeah, I mean, this is 90s Ghost Rider textbook right here. This story arc takes place fairly early on in Dan Ketch's career. And really all this issue does is to set up what this adventure is going to be about. But man, it does a really good job of doing that. Howard Mackey, he's written this character. He wrote this character years ago, but it's like he just put an old glove back on. It fits perfectly. This book seamlessly would go right into Ghost Rider's run, probably somewhere in the early teens, I would imagine, based on the characters and the circumstances that are involved. We got these cool characters that are like hellfire, demonic possessed people that have all this unnatural, unholy power that are trashing the city, and Ghost Rider keeps having to respond and deal with this threat. And as he deals with them, we find that he's just regular people kind of emerge out of these demonic creatures as Ghost Rider defeats them one by one, and we find a hint that there's a more evil, sinister presence beneath the city that seems to be orchestrating these events. The artist of this series, his name was Daniel Picciotto. I hope I got that name right. He does an amazingly good job of recreating that 90s Ghost Rider artistic aesthetic of being very dark and high contrast, and at the same time very fluid, very kinetic, a lot of motion in his pages. I really appreciated the art that he brought to Howard Mackey's story. It really does make this book feel like you're reading an old Ghost Rider back issue from the 90s, which is just such a great era, especially for this character. So yeah, that's my quick review of Danny Ketch Ghost Rider #1. And we've been talking about so many bad comics lately. It just feels good to talk about a comic that was actually really well done. I mean, this book was very refreshing to read. It really was. It made me remember why I like comic books. And I have to just recommend this to anybody out there who's looking just for a good comic to read. I think it's probably just a mini series. So it's definitely worth your time and a little bit of money to pick this up and give this title a shot. I hope you do. And yeah, that's it. That's I'm gonna leave it right there with just my solid recommendation. So let's talk about in the comments below if you've read the book or if you were a fan of Ghost Rider in the 90s. Who's your favorite Ghost Rider? Johnny Blaze, Dan Ketch, Robbie Reyes, or one of the other ones? Old West Ghost Rider, Woolly Mammoth BC Ghost Rider. They're all welcome here. While you're down there, do all the usual stuff. Hit like, subscribe to the channel if you're not already a subscriber. Thanks so much for hanging around to the end of the video, and I will talk to you on the next one. See you then. Bye.